And joining us now to further break down the election of 2024, Michael D'Agostino and Vin Candelora, state representatives, Republican and Democrat from Hamden and from North Branford. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us here today.
Thanks, Dennis.
And because you're presidential candidate one, I'll let you begin. What do you think of the
Well, I think it didn't surprise me he won ultimately nationwide. I think we all sort of saw the momentum going. What did surprise me was how well he did in Connecticut.
He did better than 2016 and 2020.
That's right. And so that was a slimmer margin. In 16, Republicans had a lot of gains statewide. We didn't see those coattails in this past election. So that sort of was the one distinguishing factor this year.
And Democrats seemed glum this week that he won. He did do better in the state, as Vin Candelora mentioned, but Democrats won all their seats, and they picked up some seats in the legislature.
Yeah, I don't know if you can really translate the results here in state house and senate races, which are very local to the national. I mean, look, we're going to be dissecting this for weeks and months, right, in terms of the results and, you know, whether she didn't distance herself enough from Biden or not. But we were just talking about this off air. The thing that I think we're all talking about in Democratic circles right now is the gains among African American and Hispanic voters, both in Connecticut, Bridgeport, Hartford, and nationally, where he just won districts in Texas and Miami, even in New York City.
Which was a bright spot for Republicans. So how do you move forward and take advantage of that?
Yeah, I think we're continuing with our message. Republicans are still holding on to sort of the working class communities. Where we've lost ground is in Fairfield County, in the wealthier suburbs. And so I think we just need to continue with our messaging. I think being fiscally disciplined, having budgets that are balanced and proposing tax reductions rather than increases, that hopefully will eventually get Fairfield to come back on our side.
Fairfield County, you know, is going Democratic. What do you think about that? Because it used to be this Republican stronghold.
Yeah, I mean, it has trended that way, although, again, obviously, you saw actually some gains that they made both in the House and held on to 2 seats in the Senate down there, which, again, I think is a reflection of Trump's overperformance both in the state and nationally.
Now, you're not running for re-election. You chose not to, but you did. Congratulations on that. What's the agenda? I'll begin with you. For Democrats, I know that they've been sharing this with you for 2025. Well,
it's a budget year, so obviously the main focus is going to be, I think you've been reading about this a lot, the fiscal guardrails. You know, are there going to be tweaks to that or not in the coming budget session? The governor's been pretty adamant that he does not want to change that. There's members of my caucus that do. There's others that don't. It'll be very interesting to see how Speaker Ritter manages that and the governor and comes up with a budget package that everybody's happy with.
And what would Republicans like to accomplish in 2025?
Yeah, I think, you know, the governor has set a precedent with working with Republicans on the budget. You know, he didn't this year, and frankly, we have a budget right now that's falling into deficit. I think hopefully he's learned he needs to work with Republicans to get a good product. So going into the next cycle, to protect those guardrails, I'm hopeful that he will work with us because, it was a lot of work to put that in place in 2017. We don't want to go back to the times of deficit after deficit after deficit. Those days were not fun.
And so now that the presidential election is over, we now move on to the governor's race in 2026. It really begins now, although some Democrats have already started, putting out some feelers there. Number one, do you think that the governor should run for a third term?
I absolutely think he should run for another term, and I think he should run and then run for president, and I mean that sincerely. There's a reason the guy has a 60% approval rating. He is the kind of Democrat, you watch him, he's as comfortable on MSNBC as he is on CNBC. There's a reason he's got a 60% approval rating. You see what failed this time around. This is a guy who's, basically moderate socially and fiscally, but also is there for working families with paid family medical leave and the increasing the minimum wage. I mean, that's the kind of Democrat I think we need to be talking about nationally. I hope he runs again. If he doesn't, it's an interesting field, I'll say that.
Yeah, let's look at that field because we've got Bysowitz, Tong, possibly some local mayors. Who do you think has the upper hand?
I want, not so much the upper hand. I want to watch that because I want to see how that relates to what's going on nationally. And what I mean by that is you're going to have a candidate like a Josh Elliott, very liberal, very progressive, and there's members of my party right now saying that's where we need to go. That's what we need to do to recapture the White House. And then you others that say, no, we need a more sort of establishment, middle-of-the-road candidate, bring back sort of the Clinton-era politics. So I want to see how that primary shakes out between like a, you've got sort of a Bysowitz on the one hand and a Josh on the other hand. That, to me, is going to be kind of a harbinger of what we're going to see nationally.
It's going to be interesting. Let's let's talk about the Republican chances, because the last time that the Republicans won the governorship was 2006 with Jody Wells. You've lost 4 elections in a row. We know that Erin Stewart, the mayor of New Britain, has already said she's leaning toward running. What do you think are her chances?
Yeah, I think Erin's appeal is to the blue-collar communities, which is our strengths. You know, when Roland had first run back in the day, I think that was his appeal. We need individuals that sort of can relate to the common person. And I think a mayor like Erin has that likability.
And who else is in the GOP stable? Governor.
You know, I mean, we have George Logan that came off of that loss, but I think he's another person who has a lot of name ID and a lot of likability. It's very early.
Okay.
I'm sure we're going to see some candidates maybe coming out of the legislature, but it's kind of nice to look at municipal leaders because they don't have a voting record that we have when we're running. So we have somebody like a Laura Hoydick in Stratford also, I think, who would be appealing.
And there might be watching right now, which has happened in years past, 2010, 2014, and the last 2, wealthy Republicans who no one heard of, who came out of the blue to run and get the nomination. What's your message to them?
Yeah, that recipe doesn't work, you know? Start out small.
Ironically, it worked nationally, but it doesn't work in Connecticut.
Does not work in Connecticut, exactly.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, great to have you here. Mike D'Agostino, Democratic State Representative. Best of luck in your post-political career. And Vin Candelora, you'll sticking around, so we'll be seeing you again. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Teaching kids how to be safe when it comes to drinking when we come back.